Right, let me share the screen again and we'll go back to the presentation. Okay, once again, is there anybody who can't see that? Please shout if you can't. Marvellous. Good. Okay, first things first, let's get some basic understanding in place between us. Definitions. What would anybody like to suggest? Whoops, a definition for what do we mean by monitoring? What do we mean in the world of M&E, monitoring and evaluation? Anybody like to suggest a definition for monitoring?
I'll have a go.
Go on then, Lisa.
Just thinking about from a sports point of view, to enable us to improve the delivery of what we're doing. So in my case, to improve the swimmer. So.
Okay, that's one. Anyone else?
Yeah, value for money. Whatever you got paid for, you got to value it.
Okay.
Hi. Okay. Yeah. Can I say? Yeah. From me, I think that the evaluation and monitoring, it is mostly how we can see our project is aligning with our objectives and with our aims and with the outcome. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else like to put forward a suggestion?
Yeah, I was going to suggest that it's about recording. Monitoring is about recording your activities, and it's and I suppose, you know, the outcomes and what's the difference you're making, you know, or in order to demonstrate the difference you're making.
Yeah, yeah. The definition that I've got here. This is generally about monitoring and evaluation. There are two good reasons why you might want to make your monitoring and evaluation more structured. The first and most important reason that is it helps you judge how effective your efforts are and what you could do to make them more effective. For me, monitoring and evaluation information that you collect will allow you to just reflect on how you're doing. Are we doing well? Are we doing badly? Is this a good year? Is this a bad year? Is this project is it successful or isn't successful? We shouldn't, as organizations, just be working on hunches. We shouldn't be in a situation where we're sitting there going, actually, you know what, I think it's going well, so let's put that into our funding returns. We need evidence, we need data to demonstrate that. So for me, monitoring is about providing very clear evidence, statistics or otherwise, of how we are performing. So monitoring is putting in place methods to collect information that prove that we are achieving what we're doing. The second reason within the definition, and the one which prompts most groups to look at monitoring seriously, is that people who give out funds increasingly expect it. This for me is a big driver within the change that I've seen over my time within the sector around monitoring and evaluation, is that funders have changed their attitude significantly over the nearly 20 years that I've been in the sector, from, oh, we like the look of you, we like the sound of you, oh, you're a befriending charity, you therefore must be delivering well, we would like to give you the money. Now, actually, that was when there was a pretty ready supply of funding. I mean, I came into the sector in 2003, had never written a funding application in my life, a grant funding application, and managed to pull in 1.8 million over about 18 months. It was there was a ready supply of cash back in those times, and funders were not as discriminating or as demanding in their funding applications back then. It was very much easier to apply for funding. That has changed significantly, and now for those that have ever written grant funding applications, they'll see the difference that in terms of the requests for information during the application process, but also during the delivery of the project, but also at the end as well, the sort of the evaluation, the assessment of the effectiveness of the grant, that actually funders are asking for a lot more information. So that's driven a lot of it. So for me, there are two main things within monitoring and evaluation. We collect information to prove that we are doing what we said we would do, to prove that we are engaging the number of clients that we said we would, to prove that we're making a difference in the way that we said we would, to prove that we are utilizing that money in a way that we said that we would, that we're spending it in the way that we would. It's monitoring is about collecting the information to prove that. For me, very much the evaluation side of things is about improving. It's about having a view on our work and our activities, what we do, and just trying to recognize what we need to do differently, how we can improve, if there are areas for development, and really just having a perspective on our activities that will allow us to just really assess, are we doing as well as we could? Are we? So for me, the two differences is monitoring is about putting controls in place to monitor, are we doing what we said we would do and how are we doing it? But then evaluation is possibly taking a slightly softer view of those statistics and other information that we get back to really have a bit of analysis and assessment of where we are as an organisation or where we are with a project. And part of that evaluation process can include looking at new ways of working. So monitoring is let's have a very structured view of what we're doing. And evaluation is, well, let's take some of that information and then think about, could we do it better? Could we do it differently? Why are we doing it that way? What's behind these monitoring statistics? How is it that we've engaged that number of people? Let's evaluate it, think about it. What is it that we're doing? And actually, quite often you'll find that when people talk about monitoring and evaluation, there's a bit of an overlap between the two areas. There's the harder, more statistic-driven monitoring, and then the evaluation. Quite naturally, if you're falling behind on a target, you're trying to engage 200 people and you've only got 67 or something, there will be a natural reaction to that statistic, which is, well, why are we not hitting the numbers that we are? And you begin then evaluating those figures and evaluating why things are done. So for me, monitoring is putting in place some performance measures. So things like key performance indicators, targets, milestones that you will perform against. So you've got a more rigid framework. But then the evaluation is thinking about, well, what's behind that? What's behind the figures that we're producing within that framework? Does that make sense to anybody? Would anybody challenge that or disagree or have a different view? No? Okay. So, monitoring. For me, monitoring is summed up in this very short sentence. It's collecting and recording information about what your organisation is doing. It's as simple as that. If you are running a project, as a bare minimum, I would suggest counting the number of people that you're working with. If your project is about signposting out, how many organisations are you signposting out to? Who are those organisations you're signposting out to? And then to count the number of those organisations that are being referred to. How many clients have you referred out to? And it's just putting appropriate measures in place that will allow you to have a handle on your organisation or your activity. So this is very much numbers driven. Monitoring tends to, in the main, be about counting. So count how many people you've worked with, count how many hours of one-to-one support you've delivered, count how many people have progressed into such and such count. So it's, for me, monitoring is very much about counting certain, putting in place counts that will allow you to manage and oversee the effectiveness of your project or your organization or such and such. Can anyone give me any examples from within their own organization, any sort of monitoring type measures that they have in place?
Shall I go again?
Yeah, just jump in.
Yeah, again, I monitor my swimmers' times. So what they perform in a competition then reflects on how I'm going to plan the next sequence of sessions.
Yeah. Do you keep account of the number of swimmers that you're working with?
Oh yeah, we take a register every day. Yeah, every time.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Penny, within your organisation, do you keep
yes.
an annual tally of how many people that you support through your activities?
Yes, it's just very difficult to have the right criteria, because some people, it might be one phone call, otherwise it might be somebody that contacts me every day.
Yes.
And it's, you know, quite often we're asked about unique individuals, but like I say, most of my work is repetitive, repeated contact.
Yeah.
Getting that recognised can be an issue.
Yeah. Yeah. So we will talk a little bit more about monitoring. This isn't just, this isn't the depth that we're going to. We will talk a little bit more about it. But I think for me, the key point with this is it's putting in place a way of measuring the effectiveness of your work. And it could be a framework of targets, measures, whatever you'd like to call them, that you collect regularly to allow you to understand the work that you're doing. Now, in most cases, if this is grant-funded activity, your bid writer, whoever wrote the funding application, will have made decisions about that. So in a funding application, they will have said, we are going to work with 75 people over the next year. That decision has already been made. So you therefore have to put in place a method for counting the number of people that you've collected. That you've supported. So, you know, the design of your monitoring system will happen well before the project starts, because your bid writer, whoever that is, will have to make assumptions about how many people can we engage, how many people can we support within the capacity that we've got available. And decisions will be made well before it comes to actually running the project. So in theory, a good bid writer will have made some of those decisions in advance. So before the project is funded, there should be a monitoring system designed for it. And it can be very simple. It doesn't need to be particularly complicated, but it tends to be numbers driven. You tend to count a lot within monitoring. On the other side, evaluation is less numbers driven. It's more about using some of the information and the data that you've collected to then just try and think about what's behind it. So use some of that monitoring information, and then to do some analysis and to think behind that. Think about, well, why are we at that figure? What have we done? And I think it's
Anouk, what did this? Can you come here for a second?
Yeah. Misa, yeah.
I think Misak was talking to someone else.
Oh, okay. Right. Sorry.
Muted him. I don't think he knew.
I'm closing down your picture so I can see the full screen while I'm doing this. So yeah, that's why I got a bit confused then. So, I mean, effectively, evaluation is taking various types of data, some of which can be monitoring information, collecting information from other sources, to allow you to just think in quite a loose way about how your organisation or your project is going on, and I'll talk about this in a bit more depth. So evaluation really is saying, right, I've collected this information. What can I read into it? What can I learn from it? What do I need to do in response to it? So that's the evaluation bit, really. So monitoring, collect information that will allow you to get a perspective on how you're progressing against certain agreed measures. Evaluation is then looking at that data plus other information and just trying to have a softer and more nuanced look at so what's behind all of this. What are we doing well? What are we not doing well? That's how I would differentiate between the two. And as I say, sometimes in the middle of all of that, there's a little bit of natural evaluating of the monitoring data, particularly if you're not doing particularly well. People will naturally start evaluating and assessing that information, that monitoring information, by going, why are we not doing well on here? Why are we not working with people in this particular area? So the two do tend to blend together. They're not two very separate disciplines, because if you are running a program, you will want to know why you're doing particularly well with a particular measure, or you're doing particularly badly with one. So the two do tend to blend a little bit, but I think in terms of disciplines, I like the evaluation because I want to know why these statistics have appeared, why performance being measured by statistic, why it's at that. So for me, I naturally sit more in the evaluation. It's a natural curiosity to go, well, why are we doing so well here and we're not doing so well on that one? What's behind that? So for me, it's in terms of skill sets, an evaluator should always be asking questions. What's all that about? Why has that happened? I'm currently the evaluation and learning partner on a project that's taking place in Crawley, supporting migrant communities who are quite isolated within Crawley. They're not accessing a lot of community support services. And the person who's running that program is an absolute monitoring master. She's wonderful. She puts great statistics together. Her table of measures show that she's performing the project is performing really well. We're hitting really well. But she hates me because I come from an evaluating place where I'm going, okay, you're doing really well on that. Tell me why. She wants to just hit the targets and go, look, we've delivered a brilliant project. And my natural curiosity is, what are you doing that's so well? What can we learn from that we potentially could share elsewhere? What is it that you've done? So she always thinks that I'm dissatisfied with what she's doing, but because she, from a monitoring perspective, she's showing that she's hitting targets. That's her mindset, and that's great. We need that. But actually having the time to sort of dig behind the stats is important too, because that's where you identify the learning, or you identify good practice, or you identify things that the organisation might want to implement across its other activities. So I suppose really what I'm trying to say with these slides is that they are two different disciplines. One is about collecting information that shows how it's performing from a quite a cut and dried position. But then the evaluation is taking the time to look at that and other information and just kind of go, what else can we learn? What else can we summarize or conclude from this information? Is that clear to everybody? Is there anybody who doesn't sort of quite grasp the difference between the two and the fact that there is some overlap between them? Anybody got a view?
Yeah, I think I have been doing it already. We keeping the record, but I didn't know the details what we are doing. But my volunteers keeping the record of whatever we've been delivering. So I just wanted to understand. We're doing it, but we want to know the words, what we are doing, and are we doing it properly? It's just making sure for myself.
Sure. Okay. Well, we'll go on to talk about sort of some monitoring practice in a little while, Shanjit. So we'll cover some of that. Anyone else got a view on the sort of the difference between the two? Do we all feel that we understand, what monitoring is and what evaluation is and how the two are connected?
Yeah.
Yeah, is this linking to like quantitative and qualitative as well?
That's part of it too. Yeah. Any other views? I mean, both have have equal importance. You know, for me, actually, monitoring and evaluation almost do truly reflect the prove and then the improve aspirations. Good monitoring will show that you're doing what you said you would do or what you're there to do. It's gathering the information to be able to prove it, and quite often hard stats can do that really well. So the quantitative element of overseeing what you do. But then the qualitative is equally important, because actually as an organisation we should all be looking to improve and get better at what we do and increasing our impact, achieving better outcomes for our clients. That should be a driver that's unique to us in the charity sector. I mean, you know, in the private sector, one of the big drivers is increasing or improving financial performance. For us, we should be equally hungry to improve our impact and the outcomes for our clients. That should be our rocket fuel that gets us up and sort of dealing with situations like COVID. So for me, having that time allocated for evaluation so that we can, you know, have some evidence for getting better, doing more, helping more people, helping them better, achieving better impact. Evaluation is an important part of that, and we need to be investing the time and effort into it, I think.
Hi, I have a question.
Yes.
When most of our projects are funded projects, and when we monitor and measure our work, and when we are trying to evaluate what we get from monitoring, and we are trying to evaluate our projects, there are some things where we want to do, and it is not in our bid. We haven't mentioned that in our bid. So because we want to improve, we are monitoring, and then we are evaluating, and we are looking, these are the things we want to change. So then sometimes you know, it creates confusion, or whether we are allowed to do these changes or not with the funder, because we have already mentioned our objectives, our outcome. So how we can then do that?
That's a really good question. So am I right in understanding that you've secured a grant to undertake a particular activity?
Yes. Okay.
And then you are, during the life of that project or that activity or that grant, during the life,
it mid-level kind of monitoring.
Okay, so during the grant, you recognise that there's something else that you would need to do.
Yes.
Okay. From a grant maker's perspective, they would probably say, we've given you money to do this. Are you going to deliver what you've said you're going to deliver in terms of outputs, in terms of activity? If you can say yes, but then within the grant, using the grant, you can also deliver this, a funder would probably be quite interested in hearing that. They'd say, okay, what else is it that you can deliver as a byproduct of your main grant? They'd probably look on that favourably. However, if it's undertaking activity that funder has no interest in funding, then they would almost certainly say, well, no. But actually, if it's being delivered as a byproduct of your grant,
yes,
monitor it, keep a record of it, because then you can very well go to other funders and say, look, this is what we delivered through this program. You know, we would like to be funded to do the same thing. I suppose an example of that would be, I ran a program called What About You, which was supporting women back into employment after a break in their career or their work life to raise their children. And getting back into work was a big challenge. It was
true.
They felt their skills were out of date. They kind of were thinking like mum, not thinking like, you know, themselves as a person, as an individual. And it was like, well, I'm a mum, who's going to want to employ me? Who's going to want to take me on? And there were some major barriers to them getting back into work. So our project, our funding for that project was very much economically focused. All of our monitoring and all of our outcomes related to changing someone's economic situation. What we found when we were delivering it was that actually we were getting information back saying, this is really helping my health and well-being. I'm feeling much more positive. I'm feeling much more energized. I'm feeling more confident. Mm-hmm. So what we did was we added to our economic measures, our economic mm-hmm. monitoring, we mm-hmm. started putting in some questions around how it was affecting someone's well-being. Mm-hmm. And what we found was that collecting that information meant that we could go and talk to a lot of other funders who were interested in funding mental health and well-being programs, because we suddenly had we'd collected information that allowed us to go to a whole new raft of funders. So you might want to do that with your projects. If you're funded to work in a certain area to have a certain impact, if you are finding anecdotally that you're making a difference in another area, collect some of that information, because it will then allow you to go to other funders and create a much broader range of funders that can support your activity without needing to change fundamentally the activity that you're delivering.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Any other sort of reflections on the difference between monitoring and evaluation? As I say, we're going to go into a bit more depth on both of them, but any initial thoughts on the difference? No. Okay, cool. Right. Just a little conclusion. As I mentioned before, traditionally we monitor in order to prove what we're doing and prove what we're funded to do. It was more about keeping the funders happy. In the last decade, that's grown significantly, where the funders are saying, we want to know your outputs, the number of people you're working with, and the number of sessions that you run, and some really easily countable activities. Over the last 10 years, they wanted to know a little bit more about the difference that you've achieved for people, for your society, for your community. They want to know what the connection is between what you're doing that can be counted, and try and put in place some measures and some counting about the difference or the outcomes or the impact. So actually, the emphasis on some of that, measuring some of that impact, where some of it could be qualitative, it's not necessarily counting, there's greater emphasis on that, which has really driven the need for better quality of monitoring and evaluation. So I think one of my first grants was to run a rural cinema, and my monitoring return was the first year's monitoring return was, how many sessions have you run? It was literally, I needed to count the number of times we'd gone out, set up a little pop-up cinema, shown a film. That's all they wanted. By the end of that 3-year project, they were saying, we want to know how many people have come along, who they are, have any of them progressed onto volunteering, how has it impacted on their health and well-being. And suddenly it becomes, the demands driven by the funders have become a lot more, the need to be a bit more sophisticated with monitoring and evaluation. So over the last 17 years, that journey has been significant, now to the extent that if you're looking at lottery funding, you've got to have a pretty robust monitoring and evaluation system in place. And in recent years, I've noticed that there are a lot more funders that are saying, we would like an external evaluation of your project to take place as well. So we don't just want you to evaluate your own work, we want someone outside of your organization to do some of that evaluation work. So to look through a different external lens at the work that you're doing. So an increasing driver is greater and greater emphasis on monitoring and evaluation of projects and activities, and grant funded activities particularly. So monitoring, we mentioned that it's mostly about counting. It's about putting in place measures that will allow you to practically and very clearly measure the performance of a particular project or of your organization. Some of the things that we that we count through our monitoring are listed here. Most of them are quantitative, so they can be counted. And the first one we've got there is inputs. Can anybody suggest what we mean by an input? What do we mean by an input? Something that we can count.
It may be like you said, number of participants or number of sessions we are delivering.
Not quite. Any other recommendation? Any other suggestions?
Is it the resources, the staff, or that you put in the project?
It's very, very much the resources that you use. The resources that you use to undertake your activities. So if we talk about staff, I would suggest that we would need to keep a record of the number of people that are inputting into a project, who are running a project. So how many people are involved with it. Another input could be venues that are being used. So if you're delivering an advice program, the inputs would be the venues that would be delivered from. These are resources that you use to undertake this particular activity, or the resources that you use within the organization. And one of the big inputs, one of the big resources that you use and you need to keep a record of is funding. So we need to keep a tally of the money that we've got coming in to your organization and to fund a particular activity. So, you know, having a finance department or a treasurer or a bookkeeper or someone who will oversee that and monitor that, that's really important, because what happens if you overspend on your grant?
You have to give it back.
If you overspend, then you've got nothing to give back, and you might actually have to fund it yourself from within your own reserves, or possibly have to go out again and try and get some match funding from somewhere else. So
easily happened.
It can happen very, very easily. So one of the monitoring activities that everybody has to do is to have some kind of budget or cash flow forecast or something for a particular project, or if you're doing it all within your organization, you need to have appropriate financial monitoring in place. Now, every time I put a funding application in, I have to put a budget in to say what I'm asking for and how much money I'm asking for. So for me, one of the most important input monitoring tools that you need is a project or an organizational budget. If anybody is not doing that, you are potentially creating a future nightmare for yourself. So you need to know what money is coming in, and then once you start spending, whether it's on salaries, whether it's on venue hire, whether it's on insurance, whether it's on volunteer expenses, whatever it is, keep a tally of your finances for that particular activity. Because if you don't, you're going to get into major problems. So for me, financial monitoring is crucial. And the reason I say it's crucial is because I'm not very good at it and I'm rubbish at it. So I get someone in who's very good at it. And they will literally every week take from me a list of invoices and things that I've spent, and they will then keep that up to date. And they will tell me if I'm overspending, they'll tell me if I'm underspending and I need to spend a little bit more. But actually, good monitoring absolutely must include good financial management, having someone who's financially literate and can keep on top of spend within your particular project. Okay, so that's crucial. That's a crucial part of monitoring, and it's what people tend to forget. They tend to forget and tend to just focus when it's about monitoring on looking at outputs, the number of things that are produced within a project, or the number of events that you run, or the number of people that you engage. They forget that actually financial management is crucial. You could be delivering the best project in the world that's overperforming, delivering transformational support. If you muck up your finances, you're going to run into trouble. So please, 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 a takeaway for everybody, put a budget together where you forecast what you're spending and when you're going to spend it. And then use that budget to monitor the finances of your organization or your project or your activity. So that's number one takeaway. For everything that you do, put a budget in place with a forecast and then keep it up to date so that you can see how you are performing financially against what's projected or what's forecast. Okay? Because think about it from a funder's perspective. One of the first things that a funder will do with a funding application is do what's called due diligence. They will look at your organization and ask themselves one very simple question. Do I trust this organization with my grant funding? Are they going to spend it in the way that I want it to be spent? Do I trust them to use that funding in the right way? So being able to demonstrate that you have robust financial systems in place is really important. Class, are you about to ask a question?
Yes, I was going to ask, do you think that it would be a really important thing? Because I mean, I did this when I was heading up the wing of a charity, to have a separate budget for the projects that you're doing, and an overall budget for your business as usual, your departmental budget, in other words.
Yep. The places where I've worked where it's been a larger organisation, a larger charity, so if we're talking turnover in excess of £1 million, they will have within their management accounts, which is kind of the ongoing record of finances, they will have cost centers. Yeah, they will have cost centres. So they will have literally a central budget, which will be for things like CEO salary, for central marketing, for office costs, professional fees and that kind of thing. But then they will have individual cost centres or for each of their individual projects as well. So if you've got someone who's heading up a project, they will be the budget holder, and they will be responsible for overseeing the finances, even though the actual practical process of monitoring those finances will be done centrally. Does that make sense?
Totally. Thank you.
Yeah. So I would suggest, if you've got someone who's responsible for spend on a particular project, that you name them as the budget holder. But if they're not particularly good at that, have someone centrally, a treasurer or a bookkeeper or someone who's within the centre of the organisation, who will actually practically do the keeping of the finances up to date. The worst thing you can possibly do, and I say this as a former funding officer at the big lottery, red flags will come up if we do not feel that finances are being tracked properly. We will not look for opportunities to withdraw a grant, but we will certainly look more closely. We'll have more scrutiny on an organisation if we feel that they are not managing their finances in the right way and they're not reporting suitably. There are wonderful organisations out there doing wonderful work, but at the heart of it, I want to see that the money that I've given to them is being spent in the right way. There are times when I care less about the impact of their work, and I just want to be reassured that they're spending money in the right way. So in terms of monitoring your inputs, the biggest one really is just making sure that that the finances are being looked after. Okay. Sorry to overemphasize that point. The second point, their outputs. Can anybody suggest what we mean by outputs?
I think that output is just tangible activities or services we deliver, like 20 sessions. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah.
Perfect.
It's the things that we create or that we do as a result of the inputs that we get. So using the resources that go into the project, what are the things that we're doing? What are the things that are being created? So I would say, let's think, a question for all of you. Let's say we've got some money in to run a debt advice service. What could be some of the outputs from that? So the money is to come in and to deliver a debt advice service in the community. What are some of the outputs? What are some of the measurable things that we're creating as a result of that?
It may be number of training sessions we deliver,
Correct.
and number of advice and information helpline we have.
Yep.
Okay.
And
Yep.
how many sessions?
Correct. Yep.
Who you're helping, how many people you're helping.
Yep. Yep. You could also look at it, actually, if it's debt advice, you could look at a measure, which is how much debt has been written off. That happens as a result of some of this, so that could be an output.
And how many people benefit from this as well?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. So I would suggest that measuring and monitoring your outputs, your activities that are being delivered through the project, is really important. Is important when you are putting a monitoring framework in place. As a funder, I would like to know, if I've given you £20,000 to run a debt advice service, how many people have you reached? How many sessions have you delivered? How many hours of advice have you given? I want to know that information, because actually I still think about monitoring in the old-fashioned way, which is about monitoring outputs. But I would also, as a forward-looking funder, like to know about outcomes. Now, the difference between outputs and outcomes are what are the measurable things that we do. Outcomes are sometimes quantitative and sometimes qualitative, but what is the difference as a result of those outputs being delivered? What's the difference that we have made to people's circumstances, to their knowledge, to their well-being? What's the difference that's come around as a result of us delivering those funded outputs? So another word for it is impact. What difference have we made to those individuals? So that's something else that needs to be considered. So we've got this money in, these resources in, these are our inputs that's allowed us to do these, to deliver these outputs. To what end? What are the outcomes? What are the measurable differences that we've made through doing these things that these inputs have funded? And I think that's an important part of monitoring now, that it's not just, you gave us this money, we did this. We need to be putting into monitoring, what difference does it make? Now, I could run a whole workshop, a day-long workshop, and I have in the past, on outcomes and designing impact frameworks and outcome measures and all of that kind of thing. There's some really good reading out there about NCVO. Actually, you've got some really good information about the difference between outputs and outcomes and measuring outcomes. And the outcomes that you put in place will be different for each organization. They will be potentially unique to each organization. And I'm not going to delve into it today because, as I say, it's potentially a Pandora's box. It's a humongous subject to delve into. But actually, a very relatively easy takeaway is worth talking to your customers and saying to them, what difference have we made to you? So if we delivered debt advice to you, how have your circumstances changed as a result of that? What could you attribute to us and the advice that we've given? What change could you attribute to that? And that is quite a useful way to begin to work backwards to what difference are we actually making. So outcomes really part of, it's worth putting in place some measures and some, again, remember monitoring is about counting primarily. What tangible measures or targets can we put in place relating to the difference our work makes?
Jason, are you asking that
At
into
the end,
methodology?
and the just
Sorry,
anywhere.
Class, can you ask that again?
I was just asking, sorry, are you asking in terms of methodology, or is that what the question was?
No, I'm saying that in terms of identifying the difference that you make through your work, that's really important nowadays. Funders no longer just want to know what has our money been spent on, what outputs has our money paid for. Funders are now much more sophisticated in what they want to know, which is, okay, so you've had this money from us, you're doing these activities, what difference does it make? So having a clear framework of outcomes, measuring the impact of your work, has to be now embedded in a good monitoring framework. So you keep a record of what resources you've used, what you're doing with it, but now understanding the difference that it makes. So how have you changed someone's circumstances? So it's not so much a question, it's more about understanding the difference that your work makes and probably putting some targets in place about that. As I say, it's a huge subject, and it's more than 3 hours, and to help all of you review your outcomes is a massive piece of work. I'll put some guides through to Toby so that he can share those with you. But for the purpose of today, being able to communicate the difference that your work does, it's got to be embedded in your monitoring. It's got to be standard. I can remember in the early days of joining the sector, I had a conversation with someone who ran a befriending service. And I was at a funding event, and she said, I've just spoken to Santander, and I told them we're a befriending charity. We make phone calls to isolated older people in a rural area. And he was really challenging. He said, so what? He kept saying, so what? And I said, well, that's the point. Just because you are a charity that delivers befriending services, that's admirable. But he wants to know what return he's going to get on his grant. You know, what difference is that grant going to make to the people that you're working with? And that was quite a long time ago, whereas now it's standard. So if you are putting a monitoring framework together where you monitor inputs, outputs, you need to not forget the outcomes, because that's what funders care much more about now. And it helps you differentiate yourself from other charities that are applying for funding as well. If you can clearly say, Mr. Funder, your grant will allow us to make this difference to people, that will be a much more convincing application than someone who simply puts in, your money will allow us to do this, these activities, these outputs.
Jason, I have a question.
Yes.
So as you said, that mentioning outcome is very important, whether that is writing a bid or in monitoring and evaluation. Could you please tell us how we can measure these outcomes? Like, for example, my sessions, they can improve health and well-being. They can enhance employability skills. So how we can measure so that we can see whether our work is going on in the same pace?
Yeah, okay. I'll give you some examples. If I start talking about outcomes, we will be online all day. And I don't think anyone wants that. You've got things, so for example, if some of the difference you make to your clients is improving people's mental health and well-being, there is an academically robust framework that I know Toby has used in the past, which is it's called SWEMWEBS. It's the shortened Warwick-Edinburgh mental well-being scale. Now, it's a tool where you ask the client to rate their they will score themselves against a scale. So one of the statements will be, I am feeling optimistic. So if they put a 0, it means I'm absolutely not feeling optimistic at all. I'm feeling really pessimistic. I'm not very positive. If they score themselves as a 10, It means they're up, they're bouncy, they're ready to face the day, they're so optimistic about everything that's ahead of them, and they're really positive. What they will do is score themselves somewhere on that 0 to 10 scale. And you can use that scale to assess across different statements someone's overall well-being, their mental state. That's one tool that you can use to measure someone's the impact on someone's well-being, because you can use that scale when you start working with them, but then when you finish working with them, and then you've got two sets of data, two sets of information, and you can compare one with the other. So you can show how if someone originally said their optimism was at 2, after you giving them some help, that it's gone up to 8. You've shown that there's been a significant improvement in someone's mental health and well-being. Now, that is just one of many tools that's out there that you can use to demonstrate the impact of your work. There are other tools, like I use a thing called Richter quite a lot, which is RICKTER, to get people to self-assess in a similar way. I do quite a lot of it supporting people into employment. And we use Richter quite a lot there about how confident people feel about their employability, how resilient people feel, how creative people feel. Again, we use Richter just as a way of getting someone to respond to a statement about themselves. We then collect all of that information, and we're using that very effectively. So you've got tools like that, and you've got things like recovery stars. You've got that's used quite a lot in the drug and alcohol field, but it's also used quite a lot by homeless charities. They use that in lots of ways. They are a way of collecting some quantitative outcomes information, but you've also got other things like unsolicited client feedback. You know, it might be that someone just comes back and says, you know what, guys, you've changed my life. I was on a downward spiral. I was heading into crisis. You have really made a difference to my life, and I now feel so much more positive. That is really good outcome evidence, but it's qualitative. It's not quantitative. It's not measurable, but it is something that's really important to give a good perspective on how your project is doing. So actually, and also things like a way to measure the impact of your work. Sometimes staff observation is a really powerful way of collecting things. If you see someone that's come in and they don't engage with a program, or they're really reticent, or they're looking really nervous, or even if they cry, seeing someone suddenly smiling and going, just projecting positivity and confidence. So long as you record that, or keep a record of that, or even just take a photo of someone if they're happy, that can be a really nice way of just evidencing the difference of your work. So you've got tools that are out there, and again, I'll send through via Toby some guidance on the different tools that are available. But it really is it's a big subject, and it would take another workshop. You can also look at things like, you know, client feedback, testimonials, case studies. They're a really nice way of collecting things. But photographs, videos, different ways of collecting that impact, you know, demonstrating that difference, it's huge. It's huge. There are lots of ways that you can do it. I'll pause at that point. Yes, Penny.
Yes, I mentioned at the beginning a difficulty we have with the timescales of some of the particularly benefits work we do. So we've got funding from the lottery for 6 months, starting from 1st of October. But we're unlikely to get many decisions, you know, by the end of the year, and we could be dealing with tribunals in a year's time. Can we say that can we take credit for work that we've already done in the previous 6 months?
Yeah, I'm working with the Centre for Independent Living Kent, who are a very similar organisation to yourself. They support a lot of people with physical disabilities, and they have the same thing where they have a very long a long-term relationship with someone, and actually during the lifetime that they're supporting a person, they could access 3 or 4 different services or 3 or 4 different projects. The way that they are looking at doing it is having an annual client survey.
Yes.
They will actually speak to an individual every year just to plot that longer term
Yeah.
progression, because
Yeah.
someone might come in for some support with a benefit claim that might not actually have a particularly positive outcome for them. They might, the benefit claim might be turned down. The tribunal might sort of, you know, not overturn the decision. But actually, that person coming in suddenly then gets involved in a peer-to-peer support group, accessing welfare calls, potentially support with a housing-related issue. And overall, whilst they didn't get the benefit situation that they want, they might overall be in a much better position. So actually, that longer-term engagement and that client survey is a really nice way of capturing some of that wider impact. So, yeah, the timing of collecting that information can be quite tricky.
Yes, and also the fact that we're dealing with some people whose conditions are deteriorating, their mental or physical health.
Yes, yeah, of course. What I offered at the last session, and I'm happy to offer it to everybody here, is if there's anything that comes out of today that you'd like to speak about on a one-to-one basis, I'd be more than happy. My contact details are at the end. I'm more than happy to sort of just have a conversation if there are any specific issues that you wanted to talk about. I'm more than happy to do that as a sort of contribution towards the project. Happy to do that.
Thank you very much.
Let's see, what else do we need? Finance, I've laboured the point on finance. The final point there, feedback. I think it's really important to capture feedback, good or bad, to monitor if a project is working well. This isn't a quantitative, this isn't a counting exercise. I think client feedback, stakeholder feedback, staff feedback is really important for you to be able to evaluate, to identify how well or not a project is going. So if someone takes the time to tell you, I really enjoyed the help that I got, but it took me a long time to get it, take that on board, listen to it, use that information. Don't just pass it off. Keep a feedback folder somewhere on a laptop and review, as part of your evaluation activities, review that feedback. Unsolicited client feedback, whether it's good or whether it's bad, will give you an external perspective on how your project is going. If you look at your targets, it might look like you're doing a great job. Listen to the people that you're there to serve, because actually their view is massively important. And if they are telling you, you kind of got there in the end, but you could have done it better, listen to it. Capture the evidence, capture the information that will be qualitative, capture that information that will help you do some evaluation. So I would suggest for everybody, if you're running a project or for your organization, keep a folder somewhere where you put together all of your client, stakeholder, partner, staff feedback on how well a project is going. It's really, really important. Who doesn't do that at the moment? Who gets nice letters coming back saying, we really appreciate the help that you've got, and then you don't really do anything with it? So you're going to change that, Misa, aren't you?
Yeah, definitely.
Again, this is the cynical old marketing man in me. There is no better accolade for your work than someone else telling you it's going well. There is no better insight into a project than the insight that comes from the person that you're there to serve or to support. They are the people that should be driving how you deliver your work. And let's create a mechanism for them to do that. So however you structure your monitoring, you have to have some room for clients to feedback and to provide you with some feedback. And on that theme, I think one of the measures that's really important to have in place is customer satisfaction. How happy are they with the help that they've got? Every time I run a traditional workshop, I will ask the question, how happy are you with the training that you've had today? What was the venue like? What was the presenter like? How did it, were they adequately prepared? gathering that information about how have we done, again, is really important. That can be quantified or it can be qualitative. You know, it's up to you, but certainly ask for that feedback. So that's got to be in your monitoring. Okay. When we're thinking about monitoring, when do you do it? Well, as I said before, project planning. Before the application is submitted, a good bid writer or fundraiser will have that planned out. They should know how many people are we going to be working with, how are we going to be supporting them, so they will know the outputs. So really, monitoring and evaluation begins with whoever is applying for that grant or whoever is tendering for that contract. They should be the person who actually puts in place this monitoring framework. Because when we move to the second point, which is beginning the delivery, there should be a structure, a monitoring structure in place that's part of the delivery plan. So as well as the budget, there should be a list of measures or targets that you have to measure against. And that should have been put together by the fundraiser. If not, you will get a situation where someone pulls the money in for a project and then it's handed over to whoever's going to deliver that project and they haven't got a clue how they're going to do it or what they need to be doing. And that creates chaos. So to avoid that, a good bid writer will actually have a clear picture of how many of these outputs we're going to aim at and what the impact is going to be, what the outcomes are that we're going to be measuring as well. So we begin designing it before the application goes in, and then we start counting it from the very beginning of delivery. One way around this is that sometimes a bid writer will put into a funding application, particularly if it's to someone like the lottery, they say, we will get in an external partner to help design a monitoring and evaluation system for us. And that's one way to bypass it. They'll probably still have to make a commitment to the number of people that they're going to support and some rough guidance on the outcomes, the difference that work is going to make. And so, but they will sometimes say, we will get an external monitoring and evaluation partner to come in and help us design our monitoring system. At the beginning of delivery, you need really clear targets. You need to know what you're trying to deliver and an indication of when they're going to take place. All projects need to mobilize. They need a bit of time to start up. So actually, it might be that the first 3 months of the project, while you're recruiting staff and you're getting your marketing out there and you're beginning to engage clients, that your targets might not be, you might not be delivering any targets. So again, when you're planning your monitoring of your project, you need to consider times. You know, it takes a while for projects to set up. Towards the end of a project, it might be that you're in a wind down mode. So it might be that over a 5-year project, it could be in the last year that actually you're delivering significantly less than in the previous year and the year before that. So again, when setting targets, you need to be aware of those kind of factors as well. I would suggest, as a bare minimum, that you review to manage your progress and to monitor your progress, that you review your budget on a monthly basis. So look at what you've spent on a monthly basis. Most organisations will put together monthly financial accounts. Whoever is delivering the project needs to have a view on that. They need to have a look at it and just see where they are. Are they behind spend or are they ahead of spend? So make sure that you, at least on a monthly basis, look at how your spending is going. Again, you can either overspend or you can underspend. If you underspend, some funders will claw that money back. That's criminal. We should never give money back to funders. If you overspend, well, that creates a massive headache. So monthly review of budgets is vital. Delivery achievements. I think every project should have a delivery plan that includes what outputs and outcomes you're going to deliver at what times. Again, I can send an example through to Toby to share with all of you, but that should be reviewed at least on a monthly basis. And if it's more than one person that's working on the project or the activity, that should be reviewed by the team. Everybody should have a review of that, because it will trigger a reaction. Well, we're doing really well on this. Very few people would look at it and say, we've engaged 200% of the people that we should engage, and would stop at that. A lot of people would look at it and go, well, why? What are we doing so well? So you're beginning to move into the mode of evaluation. Putting quarterly reports together. Most boards, I think, meet on a quarterly basis. If you're really proud of a project, put a quarterly report together, share it with the board. Get the board engaged and involved and interested in what you're doing. So monitoring can be used to get a board involvement. You may have to put an annual funding return together. Again, that's a point when you need to know where your figures are. I would not advocate that you review how your project is performing just on an annual basis, because you may find that you're well behind where you need to be. So actually, quarterly reviews really important, and there should be no surprises in an annual funding return or an end of year report. You should always know where you are against your forecast and projected performance. You will also want to put together an end of project report, which will show over the lifetime of the project, over the lifetime of the grant, what you've achieved. So that's an important part of your monitoring as well. At the end of the project, we had the grant, we spent it on this, these are the things that we did, our outputs, and this is the difference it made. I would always suggest a good monitoring and evaluation report at the end of a project. But for me, the last point, the ongoing, is really important. You should be monitoring throughout your project. You shouldn't just deliver, stop and monitor, because you'll get a backload of paperwork, you'll get a backload of data entry, you'll get a backload of, and actually if something isn't working out well, you need to be on top of it. You need to be monitoring regularly so that you can make changes if you need to. So monitoring is an ongoing activity. It's something you should be doing throughout the lifetime of a project or throughout the lifetime of a grant. So I'll skip through this very quickly. How do we use the information that we gather through monitoring? Well, we performance manage. We can have a view of how well the project is going as a whole. We might want to do that on an individual basis. So if someone is employed as an engagement officer and they're not getting the numbers in, you might, as the project lead, want to say, well, what is that individual doing or not doing? What do they need to do differently? What do we need to think about? Are they slacking off? Are they working too hard? Are they doing too much? Are they creating too much demand? It allows you to manage the performance of individual members of the team, but also manage the performance of the project as a whole. It can help with identifying continuous improvement and marginal gains. It can help you identify if there are areas where you need to get better. If you look at underperformance, you go, well, we've got to get better at that. It allows you to make an informed decision about how you manage your project. It can help you identify, potentially draw up a flag for some good practice. So if you are working with harder to reach clients and you're engaging large numbers, you should then be saying, okay, Mr. Evaluator, have a look at that, because we're really doing well on our engagement. We might be doing something that we could share with others within the organisation. So it can be a trigger for some evaluation activity. It can also identify areas for development. If you look at your numbers and you're down at 70% of your target, okay, how can we pick this up? What do we need to do differently? Monitoring will allow you to demonstrate that you're hitting your grant and your contract requirements. It will demonstrate very clearly, prove that you're doing what you said you'd do. It's important that you put it into your reports and your updates. This information to show how you're progressing against your targets is really important for that. It can be a trigger for changing. I can't remember who was the originator of this quote, but the continuous repetition of an action and expecting a different outcome is a definition of insanity, I believe. If anybody knows who said that I've badly paraphrased, don't keep banging your head against the door and expect a different outcome. Use these figures to drive change. If you've got the evidence there in front of you that what you're doing isn't working, then do something different. Funder feedback, you know, get that information back to the funders, reassure them. There's nothing worse. Well, there are lots more things worse, as we discovered this year, but one of the real pains if you are grant funded is where the funder is on your back constantly. We need this information. What's happening here? That normally happens because they're not trusting that you're spending their money in the right way, and it might not be, the project might not be delivered as you were contracted to deliver it. So actually reassuring a funder will allow them to give you the space to just get on and do what you're there to do. So the funder's needs become less important by using that monitoring information and just, you know, giving them an update on this is where we are, this is what we're doing. It's fantastic. If you give them too much information and you're doing too well on a project, they might come back and renegotiate your targets. So it's about striking a balance between the two. Video monitoring is really, really powerful as well. There's nothing better for funders to have people's stories and the clients feeding back. That's very powerful for them because they can use that to demonstrate the impact of their grants to people further up within their organisation or to their boards. So again, video is very powerful. Performance improvement plans. If you ever work in partnership with organisations and you are subcontracting them to undertake some activity on your behalf within a project or within a contract, your monitoring information can be the evidence to demonstrate that they need to improve. So I've worked on big multi-partner contracts where we've had particular clients who've just not been delivering. They've not been hitting their deadlines. They've not been delivering the outputs that we've wanted. So we have used that evidence to create a performance improvement plan, basically saying to them, buck your ideas up, achieve these particular changes in your performance, or we will be potentially exiting you from the partnership. And actually, you know, doing that based on robust monitoring evidence is a much easier conversation to have than just simply, you're not doing well enough, you need to get better. So actually having something tangible that they can work on is really important too. And also renegotiation and retargeting as well, having some robust evidence that, you know, we're not delivering quite as well, we'd like to downgrade or change our targets. You need that evidence, that data, to be able to have those negotiations, because otherwise the funder will go, well, you know, where's the proof that this is needed? And it will make it a very difficult conversation. So if you feel that you need to readjust your outputs or outcomes, then having some clear monitoring data there will help with that. I will pause at that point. Any questions? Yes, Penny.
Yes, so you're just talking about renegotiation, and I was thinking an example of that would be if instead of having a steady flow of clients who need quick answers, we ended up with a small number, but who need a great deal of support, you know, particularly people with mental health issues, yeah, who maybe aren't getting help from other services at the moment.
Yeah. So I think in that situation, if you log the client's details, log the number of hours of support, log some of the issues that you're encountering as well, again as part of your monitoring, and then demonstrate that what you put into your funding application or your tender, that actually what they are requiring from you is very different from what you initially anticipated. You are providing the evidence to be able to have those conversations. Okay. So monitoring is crucial, and you can collect that information through client registration forms, you can collect that through staff records, you can collect that through sign-up sheets, you can collect all of that information through a variety of different methods. I'm not going to go into that because you're all very different organisations, and there probably will not be consistency of tools that you would use. what I'm trying to do is get the principles behind the monitoring and why you need to monitor. Okay. Right. Evaluation. So as we said, evaluation is really looking at information and digging behind it. Why are we at that position? What can we learn from it? What do we need to do differently? How can we change? What can we do more of? And that's really what evaluation is just taking information, potentially you're monitoring information and potentially some additional information, kind of digging and going, what can we learn? So why do we do it? Why do we evaluate? We need to do some analysis in many cases. My natural curiosity makes me a fairly good evaluator. So why have we hit that figure? What are we doing that's allowed us to hit that particular figure? Are there any trends within this? Anything that we're finding that maybe we didn't anticipate? It's about having a more nuanced and less numbers-driven view of our organisation and our activity. So really, really important to set aside some time for this. Evaluation, I would suggest, is an ongoing activity, but formal evaluation, you might want to do it on a quarterly basis within quarterly team meetings. You might want to do this within individual staff performance reviews. You might want to do this if a project looks like it's doing really well. You might want to do it at the end of the year. But I think just taking a bit of time to reflect and to think about how have we reached this point with these figures, this monitoring, how have we reached this point? What have we done to get to there is crucial if we are to continue to improve, if we are to avoid underperformance, if we are to turn around what's potentially a failing project. We need to dig behind the stats, and that's really evaluation. It's what can we do to get better? What can we do to improve? So for me, do some analysis, identify some trends, identify learning. It could be that you're taking a new approach to supporting a particular client group and you are transforming their lives. What is it that you're doing that's so transformational? What is it that you're actually doing that really is, making this change for people that might be better than what others are doing? Areas for development. What are we not doing so well with that we could do better? What are our great successes? What have we really achieved? What's working really well that we could maybe do some more of? What insights can we gather from this? What is there that we cannot gather from just looking at the statistics, the outputs and the outcomes? What else can we learn from this? And this is where the qualitative information is really, really useful as well. It might be a throwaway comment from someone about, yeah, it took me a while to get in, but once I got in, oh, you guys were brilliant. Okay, so let's look at the first part of that. Do we have problems with engagement? Are people finding it difficult to register on our program? Are people finding it difficult to access the information that we're giving them? Is it that we're maybe not as EDI compliant as we could be? Is it that our marketing is not quite right? It's constantly just having a look at those little insights that can help drive that continuous improvement and that continuous development to get better and improve the outcomes for clients. I would say this as someone who does external evaluations on projects. I think sometimes you can develop groupthink about a particular project, particularly it's something that you're all very proud of. You get to the stage where you feel guilty criticizing it or trying to find ways to get it better. Sometimes having someone external coming in who will look at it and say, why are you doing this? Give me the reasons that you're doing this. An independent and external perspective on your project can sometimes identify ways that you can do things better, more efficiently. Potentially, you can increase your capacity in certain areas. It could be someone external might be able to help turn a failing project around. So actually, I think sometimes an external evaluation will give you an insight into your project and potential solutions to challenges that you may, working within that project, just not be able to find. The old adage, you can't see the wood for the trees. Sometimes, and I've done this when I've worked on projects, I've been so tied up in the detail and the nuance that it's only when I speak to someone outside the project who will say, have you tried doing this? You suddenly go, That's the solution I've been looking for. I've been struggling trying to find it for 6 months, and I needed someone who's not emotionally or intellectually connected with this project to actually present a bit of common sense with it. So sometimes just that external view can be really useful to help with the evaluation of a project. So when do we do this evaluation? When do we sort of dig behind the stats? You need some data, so there needs to be some monitoring. So you can't do evaluation from the very beginning of a project. There needs to be some data that you can have a look at, because that's the first stage of it, is review your performance data, what you've monitored, how many people you've engaged, how many hours of support you delivered, Evaluation by its very nature will be embedded. There will be people who will look at what they do and want to get better and better, and there will be staff who will want to improve the impact for clients. There will be people that will be very driven by the needs of clients, who will naturally reflect on how can we do more, how can we improve, how can we avoid upsetting clients that we're supporting. So in some respects, informal evaluation should be embedded. You should be encouraging people not to just dogmatically repeat an exercise. They should be just looking for opportunities to do things differently. I would suggest an annual evaluation is really important for a multi-year project. Just taking that time out once a year to sit down and just reflect, think about how have we reached this point. So we've got our figures here, we've got I'm monitoring, this is the number of people we've worked with, this is the impact that we've had, What do we think about that? Just taking the time out annually for a multi-year project is important. It doesn't need an evaluation report every year, but just taking a bit of time out to sit and reflect and think about the project or the organisation as a whole is a really useful exercise, because of all the reasons we gave before. You can identify learning, you can identify areas for development, you can identify good practice, successes that you might want to celebrate. You get a precious few of those in our sector, the opportunity to celebrate something. So actually, I think evaluation annually is really good, particularly for a multi-year project. I would suggest that at a midpoint of a project, it's always worth looking at. We should have reached this point. Have we reached it? Okay, what do we need to pick up on? What do we need to do differently? Evaluation is crucial if a project is failing. If the team can't find solutions and you've tried embedding, contingencies or different ways of working and they've not been successful, possibly getting an external evaluator to come in and suggest some new ways of working could be an idea. An interesting little evaluation method that I've used in the past is actually going and visiting other projects. So if there are projects doing similar things to you, just going and talking to them and getting a view on how they do their work can sometimes create a different perspective on your own work. Now, the Help Through Crisis program that Toby mentioned earlier, that was a strategic program that the lottery invested in. There was built into that an opportunity to meet other Help Through Crisis projects, and there's learning that can be acquired through that. So sometimes evaluation can sometimes mean looking at someone else's project, and as a net result of that, you end up looking at certain parts of your own project as well. The one thing I would also say as the final point there, as someone who has written a lot of funding applications and someone who's also worked in the grant making and fund giving side of things, if someone can provide me with evidence of the effectiveness of a project and demonstrate very clearly that they've evaluated and demonstrated how a project can make a difference to a particular group of people, that for me is the evidence of need that I require to be able to support a funding application. So actually, if you have funding for a project, have some kind of evaluation in it, certainly at the latter part of it, so that you are gathering the evidence that this activity should be continue to be funded. So continuation funding potentially. So possibly when you're putting that first funding application, have a line in the budget that says evaluation, some money set aside to do evaluation. Because what you're actually doing is you're creating a chain, a link to future funding by gathering the evidence of need for that future funding. So you're kind of using this funding to lever in future funding. So make sure that in every single funding application, there is a line around monitoring and evaluation so that you can clearly demonstrate for future funders, this is the difference that this work makes. Okay? Okay, the different ways that you can do evaluation. I'm going to have a break after this one, so thank you for your patience getting through this. Get an independent evaluator if you can afford it, if the budget is there for you to do it. It's useful to have someone external to just have an impartial and purely objective view of your project. It adds credibility to the evaluation, what's found in the evaluation if you've got someone external. A lot of universities do academic evaluation. As someone who has bid for evaluation work in the past and I've seen it go to universities, I don't think there's any guarantee of better quality coming from an academic organisation. I'm working on a project at the moment, a big consultation with an academic who doesn't seem to quite grasp the need for urgency and quick work. But it can add credibility to your evaluation. So getting someone outside of the organisation is credibility, additional credibility. If it's someone who's academic, comes from an academic background, a university or wherever, that can further enhance the evaluation, particularly if their subject or their area of expertise is aligned very much to the project. Some of the methods that you can use to get some useful information to use in your evaluation: client interviews, talk to your customers. If there's additional information that you're not getting from your monitoring, set up some interviews with clients. We've done this regularly for Toby when we've evaluated his projects in the past. Clients give you the insight that that you desperately need. They can be, if they're honest, they will give you useful input into their perspective of the projects. And let's remember that we do it for the clients, we do it for the people. We don't do it for the funders or for the local stakeholders, we do it for the people. So actually their input is crucial in all of this. And you can do that through semi-structured interviews, just have a list of questions, but then let the client, let the person, go off on a tangent if they need, because sometimes those tangents can be really quite telling. Staff interviews. If you've got someone independent that staff are talking to anonymously, they might give an insight into why a project's not working. They might give input that they might not be comfortable giving to their boss. Fourth point there, stakeholder interviews. Talking to others that are maybe that you're referring out to or that are working alongside you on the project, to get their perspective as well, because again, it's valuable. They might have their ear to the ground. They might, have some useful information that you can take on board to say, actually, you know what, we really need to do this differently. If we don't ask them, we can't gather that information. So that's really important. We've got focus groups as well. They're a really good way of gathering a lot of information that you can then analyze, that you can look into. People individually might not be happy talking about a grievance or something they're not happy with about your project. If they are in a group and then suddenly there are 3 or 4 people agreeing, you might then get some really good in-depth conversation about it. A focus group will be the discussion will be recorded. It then creates some information that you can react to. Trends analysis, just looking at some of the stats. Why are certain things happening at certain times? You can look at the stats and analyze those. If you've got some qualitative feedback, if there's a common theme coming back in your feedback folder that says, it took a while to connect into the project, you might want to look at, okay, what is our conversion time? How, from when someone first makes contact to when they see an advisor, what is that length of time, and can we improve that? looking at different trends through qualitative information and quantitative is crucial, is a crucial part of an evaluation. To collect some additional evaluation data, there are myriad of digital tools out there. You can use things like Menti, you can use SurveyMonkey, you can use a whole range of different tools out there that can help you gather information. Definitely analyze the stats, definitely look at the figures and see if there are any trends within those. As I said before, collect unsolicited client feedback. If a client is taking the time and putting the effort into telling you something, they're telling you for a reason, either because they think there's something that you need to do differently, or something that they're really pleased with and you need to possibly do more of it. And the other thing is photos. Let's not underestimate the power of a photograph. If you can show people that are engaging, if you're running a program that's addressing loneliness or social isolation and you're getting people together and you're seeing the positive impact of that, a photo can tell a very powerful story. So I try wherever possible to encourage clients that we're supporting through evaluation to collect photos. Not always easy. Sometimes people just don't want to have a photo or a video or take part in it. But actually, I think that there are more people that are willing to be featured in evaluations than we give them credit for. And I hate using generic photographs in evaluation reports and videos. I quite like to have real photos because they tell real stories. Oh, hello, Lexi. Welcome. So I've just got a little chat message from Lexi from Housing for Women. Okay, final point before the break. What do we do with evaluation data and evaluation reports? First of all, we make change. If we're going to put the time, effort, money into evaluating, we need to recognize that we need to do things differently. There will be something that we will need to do to either improve what's working well or to turn around something that's not working well. If we're going to have a detailed review or reflection on what we're doing, there will almost without exception be something that we can do differently. I'm working with a project in Crawley at the moment, the migrant project, and they are smashing it on their targets. They're doing really, really, really well. And actually, I've said to them, you are satisfying the needs of the funder because you are going to deliver in 3 years what you need to deliver in 5 years. You have the ability and the space to innovate and try new things. You've got the room to do that. So actually, keep delivering, but also allocate a bit of time, a bit of resource to trying new things, because there might be that you can reach even more people by achieving some efficiencies or some economies. So the first thing is, if you do an evaluation, recognize that there will be things that will come out of that, recommendations for difference, doing things differently. So be prepared to make some change. Don't just keep plodding away doing the same thing. Do more of what works well. You might want to look at changing your monitoring as well. It could be that you're just collecting information on the wrong things. We were saying earlier about the fact that you might be delivering some impact that's completely unexpected. Well, change your monitoring to try and collect some of that information so that you can gather that information that could be used for future funding activities. So, use evaluation to review, are we collecting the right information? Be prepared to revise the project. If you've learned something from your evaluation, share it. It could be that something that across your organisation, others might go, you know what, that's really useful. That radically transforms the way that I undertake this particular activity. So share what you've learned through your evaluation. If possible, influence policymakers and decision makers. It could be that with reducing local authority budgets, it could be that something that you've undertaken in a project, if it's been evaluated and been shown to be very effective, it might be a more cost-effective way for a local authority to achieve an outcome, a statutory outcome that they've got to deliver. So actually share it with commissioners, share it with local policymakers, politicians, share it with people who are budget holders locally, because it might be that you can get them to invest in your project or your way of working. I said before, use evaluation data for continuation funding because it proves that there's a need. It proves that there is an ongoing need for investment in this particular activity. And use what's proven in the evaluation as evidence to develop your organisation and develop your staff, and to develop, you know, your forward trajectory. Use that evidence from your evaluation to look at how you operate in the future. So evaluations should not just be a report, an exercise that you undertake. You produce a report, you stick it like a business plan up on a shelf. Use it in some of these ways. Just got a couple of chat comments I'm going to check out, and then we'll have a break. So, whoops. Sorry, bear with me one moment. Thank you, Caroline. We'll make sure that we get the presentation through to you. Claz, you said about open space technology. I don't know what that is. Do you want to just run through?
Yeah, I was just interested in one of the previous slides that you'd shown. Funnily enough, when I'd finished up as a head of a department in the voluntary charity that I was working with, I obviously, you know, successfully delivered lots of projects, but what I found was that the human element was a little bit slow on the uptake, and because of that, I ended up training up in change management. So, and I'm just wondering if you would agree, if change practitioners would be very useful for actually putting in some systematic change in an organization. One of the tools that they do use is open space technology, which is a little bit like focus group. And what it's about is, you know, spending a whole day with a variety of different stakeholders. So we're not just, you know, talking about the beneficiaries, we're talking about members of staff, we're talking about the trustees, we're talking about suppliers potentially, the solicitor, whoever, coming in and into one space and spending a day doing sort of rotations and talking about specific matters that need to be discussed and where change needs to be brought into the organization. And so everyone would have a lovely long 1 hour discussion about it. Somebody scribes all of the separate input in, and it's quite a fun thing to do if you're going to have a sort of org training 2-day org different training thing. You could build in open space into part of that. I don't know if that's something you're familiar with, and if you that would be helpful.
To me, it does sound very similar to focus group concept. It sounds like a sort of co-design activity as well, where you kind of have various stakeholders involved in discussing the issue, getting the issue exposed, but then actually being part of the problem solving. I think that's really powerful, and that's probably where it differs slightly from a focus group. Focus group isn't always about solutions focused. It's sometimes talking about the issue. I'll certainly have a look into it. I think it's a useful thing. Your other point about change management input, yeah, without doubt. I don't know if it's a British thing or if it's a cultural thing. I've worked with a lot of charities and been really frustrated by an unwillingness to do things differently. I've had conversations with people that have said, you know, look, we are a charity, we do X, Y, Z. Basically, these are our outputs. Take it or leave it, and the willingness to do things differently or change. It doesn't always happen. I mean, I've got a charity I'm supporting at the moment. They're going to go under because they're incapable of changing their practice. Yeah, change management is a skill set, I think, within the sector that needs a bit of work. Yeah, I agree. I
they
think it's
just got
required.
so many tools. I was exposed to all these tools that I thought, I wish I had these tools when I was, you know, heading up this department and was doing all my monitoring and evaluation, because a lot of those tools would be so helpful for the M&E side of things, I think.
Yeah, absolutely, couldn't agree more. Okay, can I suggest we have a very quick 5-minute break? Would that be okay? I have badly managed my time on this. I'm really sorry, and been talking a lot and not giving you a chance to. But can we be back in 5 minutes, and then we can go on, and then we're on to the really interactive bit. So I'll see you at 12:10. Don't log out. Just go away from your monitors and then come back in.
Yeah.
Right, are we ready to? Do you think we've got people back, Toby? Do you think we're ready to go?
It looks like it. I will just have a quick scan across.
Well, if we're still recording, because we are, people
Yeah.
can catch up afterwards if they're not.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Right. So, just a quick one here about who we involve in monitoring and evaluation activities.
Okay.
So, as I mentioned before, just now, clients are crucial in all of this. We need to be getting feedback from the people that we are there to serve. So,
Yeah.
clients, we must gather information from them through monitoring. We must gather information or input from them when we're doing evaluation. And we mustn't be afraid of asking them, and we mustn't be afraid of them potentially coming back and telling us that we're not doing a good job. For me, that's a really crucial component of any excellent organisation, is that you're willing to take it on the chin if you get some negative feedback, because that shows a commitment to continuous improvement. That shows a commitment to, we are here for you, clients, and actually we just want to your satisfaction and achieving your particular objective, supporting you to achieve your particular objectives is what drives us. And I think actually regularly having embedded in your monitoring or even just in evaluation activities some platform for clients to feedback, I think is crucial. So annual client surveys, sampling of clients, providing mechanisms whereby clients can feedback. So feedback forms on activities, opportunities for clients to submit anonymous feedback, giving them the opportunity to write things on your Facebook feeds, and all of that kind of stuff is crucial. They should be the fuel that drives your organization. And in this twisted world of grant funding, quite often it's the needs of the funders that drive what we do. By opening your organization up to the voices of your clients, you will be creating a much better organization that's focused on the needs of the clients. And ultimately, if you take that leap of faith, you are going to achieve better outcomes for them, which makes you more fundable. So it is a leap of faith, and I would encourage everybody to take it if they possibly can. Client contacts is the second group that you may wish to involve. You might want to be targeting children and young people, or vulnerable adults, or people that are unable to necessarily represent themselves or what they need. It might be a parent or a carer who could speak on behalf of them. It might be that you want to get an advocate or responsible adult to come in and talk on their behalf, or to support speaking on their behalf. So actually, sometimes it's not always the client, the beneficiary, the participant that you're involving in evaluations. And sometimes actually, speaking to a parent or a guardian or a carer can give really good insight. I mean, I worked on a project, a Prince's Trust funded project, and we had this particular young man who was really troublesome on the program. He was a pain. He was really difficult to work with. And we thought we failed with him. We thought we hadn't made any difference. We hadn't had any impact. His whole demeanour was negative towards us. But it was only when his granddad came in at the awards ceremony and said, you have no idea how he talks about you lot and how he talks about the difference you've made and what he's achieving and the difference I've seen. We were all in floods of tears because actually we didn't get that feedback from him, but we got the feedback from the granddad, and we realized that actually we needed to change some of our practice about how we were monitoring some of that impact. So therefore, the client's contacts, those that know them best, are quite often really can provide some really good insight. It's just different perspectives on the work that you're doing. Staff will often know what's working, what isn't working, and how things can be done differently. Staff are crucial for monitoring. I am working with a charity at the moment that does a lot of work with advocates. Advocates don't like monitoring or filling in monitoring forms. But actually, when you come to the end of the month and say to them, okay, how many people have you seen? Or I don't know, I've been really busy. Suddenly they begin to realize that actually they need to monitor their activity better. And they also need to input into evaluations more effectively, because it's their way of telling their story and really demonstrating the impact that they're making. Volunteers can often provide really useful insight, particularly into evaluations, but they're also crucial for monitoring as well. If you're working with others, you need to be very clear from the outset of a project that they need to be providing monitoring information. One of the challenges, if they have a database and they put all of their client interaction information, their monitoring information into their database, how does that then get transferred across to yours so that you can oversee it? There could be some issues around that. If other organisations are referring people or clients to you, get them involved. What's the referral process like? Are they signposting or are they actively referring? How long does it take? Are they getting any feedback from the people that they've referred? They will have a view on your project and your work. Again, don't be afraid to ask for it, because worst case scenario is they tell you that something's not right. That creates an opportunity for you to improve and change that and make it better. Better outcomes for everybody. Other stakeholders, don't be afraid to invite them. The police, community mental health, community nurses, GPs, others that have a stake, that are connected in some way to your project, get their views on evaluations particularly. Funders, sometimes funders are overseeing multiple projects that are working in similar areas. Their perspective might be useful. If they are invited to an evaluation event, then they may say, well, actually what's working in Horsham is really transferable to what you guys are doing here. And actually, we've got a program that's running up in Stockport that's encountered the same things. Maybe you want to have a conversation with them. So getting your funders involved as well. The old days of a very transactional relationship between a funder, they give us some money, they leave us alone to get on and do it. Those days have gone. Funders want to be more engaged and to understand what you're doing. So funders might provide useful input into evaluations. The same with commissioners. If you are on a public sector contract, your commissioners are more like partners and less the people that just buy the service from you, or at least they're trying to work that way. And I think with shrinking budgets, they're probably going to want to move more that way as well. Local politicians may have a view. I try and keep things apolitical, but sometimes you have a really good engaged local MP or local councillor who can input into evaluations. I'm ambivalent really about their input, but others I know have done that very successfully. Involve your trustees, even if it's just to sit there and to listen in a focus group. Get your trustees to understand the nature of your work more effectively. Share with them reports, monitoring reports, share with them evaluations, get them to understand what you're doing with your work and the difference it makes and some of the challenges that you've got, because they will be making big strategic decisions about your organisation. They will be inputting into the strategic direction of your organisation, and they need a level of understanding about what's happening on the ground. They don't need to make operational decisions, and I would suggest shouldn't, but do get them involved in seeing some of those reports. Champions. There will be champions within the community. There may be clients that are really delighted with what you're doing. Get them involved in evaluations as well, because their views are crucial. if there's something that you're doing really well, get them out there championing your project, your organisation, talking about it. Word of mouth is crucial for our sector, and having those people that are on our side, it's really important for us. And the final one is academics. External evaluation by academics with relevant experience of your area of work can really add some credibility to your evaluation, your evaluation activities. So if you know of someone who's working in a particular faculty at a particular university, you know, they may be in a position where they'd be interested in evaluating your work, potentially free of charge, although the pressure on their budgets is also quite high. But there may very well be local academics that you might want to build a relationship with, who may provide insight or opinion, or even actually undertake evaluations for you. So yeah, try and engage with HE if you possibly can. Okay, we have got 35 minutes for this next bit, and I want to do it in the form of just an open discussion. So we're not going to write anything down. I just want to try and sort of gauge what your views would be on this. So I've put a scenario together here. We've got Alfred, who's the bid writer for the Ealing Homeless Support Project. If that organisation exists, I apologise. I just plucked it out of the air. But what we're doing is we're creating this scenario where Alfred has been told by the CEO that he's got to apply for some funding for a new debt advice service in the borough. He's at that stage where he's beginning to put the funding application together, and he's thinking, right, monitoring and evaluation. I'm planning what the application is going to look like. What do we do in terms of monitoring and evaluation? So first question to all of you is, who should he be talking to at this stage while he's planning? When he's thinking about planning the project, and he's thinking about sort of planning the monitoring and evaluation part of it, who do you think he should be talking to during this planning phase? Any suggestions? Who have we said is crucial to all of this?
Would he talk to clients?
Yeah, the client
Or use the service?
who he's hoping to help.
Yep.
Through the funding.
And how could he talk to them? How could he communicate with them to help with sort of designing the monitoring and the evaluation?
Could do a survey.
Yep. Facebook. Could he use Facebook polling?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Reach
yeah,
out to
social
people?
media.
Yep. Could he, under normal sort of circumstances, without COVID-19 being in the mix, could he go to certain events and gather opinion that way?
Yeah.
Yeah, he could use drop-ins that kind of exist already in the community. Yeah, and go and get advice there.
Yeah, I don't know. What about if he went to the local job centre? Would he then be able to gauge or gain some information that way?
They don't give any information out.
No, that's what I was. Yeah, that was. Yeah.
What about he could talk to
Confidentiality.
an organisation, perhaps a national organisation, something like Christians Against Poverty, and then he could see where his project would fit into that, see how they're doing monitoring, see if they've got any information they can share with what works and what doesn't. And so he's really kind of thinking about how the project would fit in, and perhaps use some different ways to monitor and evaluate compared to the way they do. Because if you go to a funder and you're replicating what someone does and monitor the evaluation, monitoring in the same style, unfortunately funders always want new ideas, fresh ideas. So that's what I do. If that'd be my first port of call, someone who might have some national insight and someone wanting to give you details of the bigger picture, really.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So churches seem to run a lot of homeless projects as well. Particularly more and more they're getting involved. So you could actually go around to the various churches and gain some insight there of what's needed, and then maybe talk to the people who are using that, you know, the homeless shelter. Yep.
Absolutely. So we've so far we've got existing clients, we've got prospective clients, we've got stakeholders, we've got national partners as well.
Council website, check on the website, maybe there's information on the homelessness.
Yeah. Penny, you had your hand up there.
I think the housing department of the council.
Yeah.
You know,
a key local stakeholder, absolutely. Claz?
Wondering if this would be an option. For example, with Dementia Concern, and I don't know if this is done in Dementia Concern, but the Alzheimer's Society, which is a research body, it's a research charity, would probably be somebody to approach in order to find out what kind of statistics you know, do they gather, and would that be helpful for us in terms of our monitoring and evaluation?
Yep, absolutely. I think the point I'm trying to make with this really is bid writing should not be done in isolation. You need to get an idea of what do we need to do, what need is out there, are we replicating something else, but what's the kind of information that we need to consider? Because again, you need to demonstrate that there's a need for this. You need to demonstrate evidence that there's need, and actually talking to quite a broad range of stakeholders at the point where you are beginning to design your application, which will include monitoring and evaluation methods. It's worth talking to others. So, you know, the idea of a bid writer being this lonely soul that sits in front of a computer all the time and does nothing else other than write is wrong. So it's crucial that you begin the process of collaboratively gathering information and getting input into all of this.
Jason?
Yes.
I have a question. So how we can do this with people who are hard to reach, or those who are newly arrived? So they may not be going to council, they may not be sometimes going to faith-based organizations, or they are isolated. How we can do with them this process?
Again, that's a huge topic. What I can give from my experience is working with hard to reach communities. There will be community gatekeepers who could be faith leaders, they could be housing providers, they could be emergency support provider organisations who are the gateway through to the harder to reach. From my experience, that's the way to reach out. You can put a lot of effort to try and find those individuals, but one of the best ways is to, and it's a horrible marketing phrase, is to piggyback on those community gatekeepers who are almost the sort of the first access point for the harder to engage. Because even if they cannot put you in touch with individuals, excuse me, you can at least get their input and their insight into some of the challenges and some of the issues that you need to consider. But again, that's a big subject. It's a hard one, reaching the hard to engage.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a big. Okay, during the break, Shanjit and I were talking about sort of monitoring forms and some of the information we may wish to collect, and that's really the nature of the next question. So if we're thinking about monitoring, what are some of the bits of information that that Alfred will want to put into a monitoring form or a monitoring framework for this project? What are the kind of things that he would want to capture in order to effectively monitor the project, the debt advice project, once it's up and running? What are the kind of things, information that he should be capturing that he can use to then monitor how the project is working?
Number of beneficiaries and the type of beneficiaries.
Yep.
And the improvements of the beneficiaries. What did they, how did they, what did they achieve from this event or a project?
Yeah.
Time scale.
Some of them.
Lisa?
I'm just going to say time scale, because each individual will be different, and so you can monitor the length of time it took for someone to improve their circumstances as a result of the project.
Yeah. Anything else?
I'd say maybe long-term impact in terms of you might have helped a client get out of debt, but have you given them the tools to ensure they don't find themselves there again in the future? So have they learned budgeting tools, and etc., etc.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else?
Say knowledge, the knowledge base. You could ask them at the start, you know, where would you go? And then ask them at the end, where would you go? You can test how much more knowledge they've gained, but also confidence. I think that confidence, these soft emotional aspects can be, you know, measured at the start and then measured at the end. You know, the whole resilience idea as well, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone got anything else to throw into the mix?
Finance, maybe.
Say again, sorry.
Finance.
Yeah, absolutely crucial. So I think there are two main things that Alfred should be thinking about. I think the first one, absolutely crucial. There needs to be some kind of budget and a cash flow forecast that he puts together, which is saying, this is what we're going to spend and this is when we need to spend it. So he needs to be planning all of that out. So how he uses those inputs and then the financial plan for it. So there's got to be a budget. And then I think there needs to be a record of the clients from which he can calculate the number of people supported, the amount of time it's taken for each of them. I think for every client, what he'll need to do is to collect, number one, client details. So name, address, phone number, all of that. So we've got client details first of all. Then something around the client type or their demographic or their needs or characteristics, something around that. So who they are, how we can contact them, and what support needs they may have. I think the third point will be around their support objective, what it is they want to achieve, or it could be a particular challenge or issue that they've got that they want help with. So that's three things. Then the fourth thing is how we've helped them, what our outputs are, what services they've accessed. So you can see the number of hours of one-to-one that they've had, or the number of events that they've attended, or the number of online training programs they've attended. So something about the nature of the support that they've had. The next one is about that short-term impact. What difference has it made to them by accessing this support? So we need for each client to keep a record of the difference it's made. I suppose my terminology and my language is slightly different than Toby on this. He said about long-term impact. I sort of think about things like progressions. What have we helped someone to go on to do? So what have we achieved in the short term? And then what are they doing? Are they avoiding slipping into crisis? Are they in more secure housing? Have they gone on to get a job? Have they become part of a support group or whatever? What have they gone on to do? And then the final one that we missed, feedback. What feedback are they giving us? What are they providing us with that's unsolicited? What are they telling us? What can we gather from them that we potentially could use as part of our wider evaluation? So we've got client details, a bit about their demographics, about the type of client that they are, their objective, what it is they're trying to achieve, a record of the support that they've accessed, the difference that it's made or the impact, longer term impact or progression, and then feedback. So we've got two main areas for monitoring: finance, client details. And then what we do from those individual client records is that we can extrapolate out the number of clients that we've supported. We can then analyze how many hours of one-to-one all of our clients collectively have accessed. We can then look at collectively what difference the project has made to the people that we've supported. So it provides us with the information that we would need to go on to do some more detailed and nuanced evaluation work. So they're the two parts of the monitoring. Now, to come right back to the beginning, and Misa's point about where we record all of this, we could use something as simple as an Excel spreadsheet, where in theory, you could capture all of that information, where each client has one line on that spreadsheet, and each of the columns are the different bits of information that you want to collect through your monitoring. You can have it as simple as that. As I say, I had a £500,000 a year project that I ran in Kent for 5 years. We collected all of our information on that. Nowadays with GDPR, we wouldn't be allowed to do that. I would suggest for any, can we have a quick show of hands who hasn't got a database or a client support CRM, client relationship management database? Is there anybody that hasn't got anything like that? Shanji,
could you describe in a bit more details, please? I might have it, but I don't understand your...
A database is just a way that you can record information about who your clients are, what help they've had, what difference you've made. Just a resource for recording and storing all of that.
I want to create that. I've got it. I've got the details of the client. I just want to create the database, really.
Right, okay. So is everybody at the moment collecting client information?
Yeah.
Okay. Just chuck them out there. Where is that information stored?
So we use a platform which enables all of our swimming operators, all the clubs' operations to be monitored under that. We run that software. So be it, you know, giving out letters to, you know, recording their registers, to inputting all their personal best times. So we use everything from there, and we can gain information from, you know, about, you know, their ethnicity, their age group,
right.
From there.
That's good. Anyone else using any kind of CRM, a client relationship management system, or a database or an online collaboration tool? Toby, you've used Trello, haven't you?
Trello and SurveyMonkey, yeah, both together.
There's one that I've used in the past called, well, currently using, called Podio. And it's an online collaboration tool. It's quite sophisticated. It's free to use for charities, up to 12 users. It's cloud-based, it's GDPR compliant. You can tweak it and tailor it and make it bespoke to your organization from a series of off-the-shelf tools. And the reporting on it is all right. You can get some pretty decent monitoring reports coming off it. podio.com. But you've got other things like Salesforce, which take a bit more sort of tweaking to make it fit an organization. What's the other one? Lamplight is one that I think has been developed by Sheffield CVS. I think they've developed Lamplight. That's quite widely used. And
Slack, that can
Slack
be
is
the way for.
Yeah, Slack's another one. Monday.com I've seen used as well. So there are online collaboration tools that you can use that don't cost very much. And yet I'm still working with charities that use Access, Microsoft Access, to log all of their client details. So and they've developed it, and they're still quite sophisticated. I should probably ask for this not to be, you to turn the recording off at this point, but the lottery, until a few years ago, was still using an access database on part of their grant, their funding. But yeah, probably shouldn't have said that. But yeah, access still works for a lot of people. It's great. So you need GDPR. It really has created some challenges around that. You need to make sure that whatever way you are recording and storing client information, that they're giving you permission to do that first of all, and that you're using it in a GDPR compliant way. Again, probably for the third time today, I'm not going to talk about GDPR because it's a huge subject. I'm not an expert in it, but just make sure someone within your organization understands what your GDPR responsibilities are, because it's important that you are GDPR compliant. So they're the two things that Alfred needs to look at. Finance, he's got to have some kind of tool in place to manage the finances, and then record all of that client interaction in a way that he can then pull some information off to analyze and to look at, showing that you're hitting the numbers that you need to hit. And Excel is a great tool for doing a lot of that analysis. You know, if you use Access or Podio, you can export the information from that into an Excel spreadsheet, and then you can do all sorts with the formulae, with the charts. You can do lots and lots of information, lots with that information that you've got. Okay, that's the second point. Third question: what should he hope to gain from an evaluation? So if he's thinking at the beginning about an evaluation, what are the kind of things that he would hope to achieve through an evaluation of the debt advice service?
Difference is made to people.
Yep.
The number of people who access the service.
Yep.
And how many people benefit from the service.
Yep.
And what was not achieved through this project.
What can they do? What could he do better in the future?
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
Was the design of the project was it well designed? Could it be designed in a better way?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. What's working well? What's not working well? What can we do more of? What can we learn? What can we share with others? Is there a need for us to continue with this project beyond the grant? Do we need to do more of this? Are there needs that we're not meeting? Are some of our processes not really very effective? That really is the problem with evaluation, is that you are looking at a project from lots and lots of different angles, but you really need to think about, at the beginning, what are the kind of things that we think we might need to know? And I would almost, without exception, say, is there going to be a need for continuation funding? Now, I say that as a bid writer, as a business developer, as someone who's always looking, where's the money coming in the future? I would always make that of an evaluation, is, are we looking for funding for a finite piece of work that will come to an end and we won't need to repeat it? Or are we looking for funding to begin introducing a service that has got to run and run and run? So I think an evaluation has got to ask that fundamental question: do we need to seek continuation funding or additional funding, or do we need to expand it or change it? So go back to the evaluation slides when you get the presentation and think about all of those things when you begin evaluating. The other thing that he needs to think about is what you will do with that evaluation. You know, what are the things that you're trying to achieve with it? Continuation funding, again, absolutely one of them. Are you trying to prove that public services need to be commissioned in a different way? Are you trying to demonstrate through your evaluation that this should be funded centrally? I've just helped an evaluation of a veterans advocacy program. One of the things that they're trying to do with that evaluation is to demonstrate or to make the case that every person who leaves military service should have access to an advocate, to avoid them slipping into crisis because they're exposed risk of significant mental health issues, homelessness, drug and alcohol addiction, domestic abuse, lots of reasons why they need access to an advocate. So that's what they're hoping to achieve with that evaluation, is to just prove that this advocacy support should be mainstreamed by the department's Ministry of Defence, sorry. So I think thinking about what we would hope to achieve through the evaluation is really important. And number one on that list is, demonstrate there's need for continuation funding. Yes, Claz.
You say that there is a difference between setting up the framework for monitoring and evaluation on a first-time project, so something that's absolutely new and fresh, it's not really been tested before or idea, versus a service kind of.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you very well.
Oh, sorry, I don't know how else I can help that. Can you hear me? I think it's somebody's.
Yeah. Could you just josh it into a chat message? Thank you. I suppose really one of the final questions as well would be, should the evaluation be done internally? Are there the skills within the organisation to do it? Is it a simple enough project that an evaluation can be embedded in the work of the team, or does it need to be someone external to do this? Do we need that external perspective on the work that we're doing? If we're trying to change the way a particular issue is addressed, do we need that robust academic background to the evaluation to really make the case for it to be done differently? Or do we just need to, or can we do it internally? Do we have the skill set and the capacity to do it internally as well? So I think that would need to be considered, because obviously that would affect the budget, the funding application budget. Okay, so Claz's question is there a different approach between monitoring and evaluation framework for a first-time project versus an ongoing service for continuation funding, for example? I think any monitoring and evaluation, whatever the project, whatever the activity is, whether it's a project, a pilot or anything like that, is going to need to demonstrate a connection between the outputs, i.e. what is done in terms of client support, and the impact, the difference that it makes. I think that's the crucial part, is that the monitoring needs to show this is what we've done and this is how many people we've done it with, and this is the difference it makes. I think that's the crucial element. So so long as that is included, I don't think there needs to be massive variation between a first-time one-off project and something that is just continuation. I think that's what's got to be demonstrated, really.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing is, I think sometimes funders don't like funding existing services, do they? They want to see something innovative. Sometimes it's good to say, you've run it as a pilot project, and now you want to scale it up, or you've run something in the past, now you want to deliver it a different way, taking on board the sort of the feedback from the previous service.
You're absolutely right, Ian. That's true. I mean, within the lottery, they refer to this term continuation funding, but actually what they really want is they want version 2 of that original project that shows that there's new learning that's been embedded in it. So it is pretty much taking this original project that's been effective and really putting it on steroids and adding in some additional bits to create effectively a new project. So yeah, they call it continuation funding, but it's not really continuation funding. It's just funding for version 2.
I think it's a big issue for lots of groups that have been going for years and years and years delivering the same service, and they've got to actually think in terms of, we have to keep reinventing it in terms of a different project base, as opposed to, oh, it's an ongoing service and it's just been going years and years and years. Because funders they don't like that. They want to have something, oh, it's new, it's innovative, it's like, it's a different way of thinking, I think, which some of the small charities from going for years and years need to try and adopt.
It is a challenge, and unfortunately it's where funders need to step up a little bit, to just think creatively. Well, think realistically. You know, if something works, it works. And so long as there is some continuous improvement and marginal gains embedded in how the organisation runs and how the project runs, then it will achieve that development and enhancement and improvement. It doesn't need the radical repackaging that they appear to be demanding, because it is frustrating. I mean, I ran a really successful project for 5 years, you know, and they said, well, it's just, you're coming back with something that's not really different from what's before. Why are we just propping up something? Well, because it works. You know, it's transformational. Why have we got to create something new just for the sake of it? But yeah, that's a question for the funders, really, isn't it? But it is annoying.
Yeah, I mean, you can see within funders, there's sort of trends come and go. So it's like the same sort of people going between getting the same jobs, and it's all like, oh, what's trendy this week, kind of thing. And it's all,
yeah.
Like now, it's all like involving the service users in the design and delivery of the project. That's like flavour of the week. Then it'll move on to something else. And I think it's quite frustrating for the people on the ground. This is like, it's all the words you're using as opposed to what the actual, you know, delivery of it.
Having worked on that side of the fence a couple of times, it's very difficult to adopt the culture that exists on the grant making side of things, because you do sometimes sit there and go, that's not fair. That's not fair. You are imposing your needs when you shouldn't be doing that. It's not right. And it's frustrating for the reasons that you've given. Right. Sorry, because I think we're near. Oh, hang on, there's a chat question, I think.
That's just me, Jason. On the subject of evaluation and monitoring, I've just sent round a link to everyone of the survey. Please, can everyone just give a little bit of feedback on the session today? It's so important, because for us to be able to deliver these sorts of sessions, we have to show our funder that we're delivering useful sessions. And yeah, please just take a second. It doesn't take long at all to complete that survey, but if you could, I'd be very grateful.
Thank you, Toby. And that will form part of my evaluation of this session, to actually work out what's gone well, what hasn't gone well, what I need to do differently in the future. So it's kind of monitoring and evaluation live. Okay, I think this is probably the last slide. So in theory, what have we learned today? I hope you have a better understanding of what monitoring is. It's putting in place the measures and collecting information that you can use to identify how your project or your activities or your organisation is performing. It's to allow you to have appropriate controls over what you're doing. Evaluation is what you do with some of that monitoring information. It's looking behind the statistics, it's looking behind the monitoring measures and just going, well, where are we? Why have we done that? What can we learn? What do we need to do differently? What do we need to do more of? It's taking the time to actually collect all of that information, analyze it, review it, with a view to getting better for your clients, achieving better value for money, and just really taking the time to reflect and assess, you know, what are we doing? Have we done the right thing? Do we need to continue this? And just having that headspace where you can think about how you're doing what you're doing. So the monitoring is about what we're doing, and the evaluation really is, okay, so how are we doing that? You thought a bit about the timescales. It goes right back to the beginning of fundraising. It's not something that you can put in a bid for and then you suddenly think about how we monitor and how we evaluate. It needs to be thought about when you're putting funding applications together. You understand the number of people that you should be involving in monitoring and evaluations, from clients right through to community partners, through to the funders, commissioners and others. Get a lot of different perspectives on how your project's working and how your activities are working. And don't be afraid for those opinions, because if they're given in the spirit they should be given in, it's about getting better and better and better and achieving better client outcomes. There are a range of different tools that you can use to gather that information. Some of them are just through people talking. Some of them are through feedback forms. Some of it can be using digital tools, different things like that. And the final thing is about the usage of monitoring and evaluation. You know, it should be clear that it's not just an academic exercise. It's not just we do it because we have to do it. It's doing it because it helps you get better. It helps you improve the support that you're offering to clients and improving the outcomes for them. But it also helps build a potentially lasting relationship with a funder, because if you've delivered well, there are some funders that will go, you know what, crack on, keep going, we will fund you for another year. They are few and far between, but if you can get into one and they like you and they like what you do, and you can clearly demonstrate the difference that you're making with their money, and they feel that it's secure in your hands, you have the potential foundation of a lasting funding relationship. And remember that we're not just talking about grant funders, we're talking about potentially corporates, we're talking about you know, potential high net worth individuals as well, that they could potentially support something. So monitoring and evaluation provides you with lots of different things. Better project performance management, the ability to tell your story more effectively. This is the difference of you know, that we're making. It gives you a means to continuously improve your organization, how you operate and how you deliver impacts for your clients. But it also provides you with crucial information that's vital for your business development and your ongoing fundraising activities. So for me, any organization that doesn't monitor their activities and doesn't take the time to evaluate their monitoring or what they find is putting themselves at a disadvantage to others that do. It doesn't need to be resource intense. Funders are prepared to pay for it. You know, whether it's done internally or externally, funders expect that line in the budget to be monitoring and evaluation and allocation towards it. I think on Awards for All, the lottery expect up to 10% of the total value of the grant to go towards monitoring and evaluation. So they want that information and they're prepared to pay for that evaluation work to be done. So utilize it, because it will help your organization get better and achieve better outcomes. Yeah, I'll leave it there because we are at 1 o'clock. Does anybody have any questions just to finish it off with? Oh, I see we've got something on the chat. Lovely. That's just thanks from Ricardo. That's brilliant. Anyone else
Jason,
have any questions?
it was very good. It was very informative. We learned quite a lot to how to secure our grounds with the monitoring and evaluating.
Thank you. Thank you very much. If you have any specific questions, I'm more than happy to answer them via email. If anybody just wanted a follow-up phone call, again, I'm more than happy to do that. I'm aware that we've covered a lot. It is a big subject. There've been some big areas like outcomes and outputs that we haven't really been able to delve into. But I'll send some additional resource through Toby. The presentation is going to be shared. The recording is going to be shared as well. So if you want to follow up with me, I'm more than happy to offer some assistance.
I'm just going to give something else a plug. There's another session coming up with Jason on the 30th of October. It's about co-production, and this is something, again, Jason advised me with on one of the projects, Help Through Crisis. I had no idea whatsoever what co-production was. And basically, it's about ensuring the voice of your clients forms the future direction of a project. And it was so interesting because that was something we were doing very well on a project, but we weren't really focusing on that. And it was so good to start co-production elements to the program. So we started talking more to the people we were supporting, finding out what they thought of it and how we could change things. And I'll just give you a quick example. The project was set in food banks, and one of the clients, a volunteer in the food bank, went up to them and said, would you like some advice on managing your finances? And this client said she didn't know what this person was talking about, because that's why she was at the food bank. She didn't have any money to manage. And so it's everything to do with the way, from the client's perspective, And it could be little things like that, or fundamental things about their entire program that need to change. But it's basically getting that voice of your clients and making sure their insight and feedback goes into the program to make little changes and bigger changes. And it's something that all funders are really hot on at the moment. And so that's why I was very pleased that Jason was able to give me advice on developing co-production. So if you found today useful and you want to find out about co-production, then make sure you sign up for that one. I will send the link around when I send all the details relating to this, but I'm sure you'll find it very useful. Yeah, that was a big plug.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The one thing I'd say to follow that up, if you are thinking about a bid to the big lottery, to their Reaching Communities programme, you have got to go above and beyond on demonstrating how the beneficiaries are going to be involved in your project. What do they call it? What's their strategy? I've forgotten what it is. Putting people in the lead. They want to see that the people that are going to benefit from the project are actively involved in the design of it, in the delivery of it, and in sustaining it. So you've got to show that those beneficiaries are a sort of part of your project, or an active part of your project. So if you're going to put a lottery bid in, hold fire, sit in on that workshop, get a few ideas, and then put your application in after that.
Oh, but you've got one next week as well on advocacy.
Of course, yeah, thanks, Ian. Yeah, we've got plenty in the pipeline. Yeah, thanks for that.
That's next Friday at 10, advocacy and effective representation. I think Jason's delivering that as well.
Yep.
So yeah. Yeah, I'm working for a charity at the moment, 2 days a week, who are called the Advocacy People, funnily enough, who are one of the leading providers of statutory advocacy services. And it's a fascinating world. It's an absolutely fascinating world of advocacy, where you are there to support people, to ensure that their wishes and their voices heard in decisions that relate to them as individuals, but also there's sort of collective representation included in the workshop as well. So it's, yeah, advocacy, I think advocacy is on the rise. So it's a useful area to understand.
And I'll be sending links around to sign up for that one too.
Thank you.
Okay, so thanks again to everyone who's completed the survey just then. Thanks, Class, for your message that you've done that. So, thanks very much to Jason. And I look forward to seeing you all at the next sessions that Jason's delivering.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thanks for the input.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.